welcome to this short demo of Monokle, a tool to make Kubernetes manifests really easy to work with. I'm Ole Lensmar, CTO at KubeShop. So what is Monokle? Monokle is a desktop tool to make working with Kubernetes manifests much easier. It's an open source tool, it's MIT licensed. You can go to GitHub and download it and interact with us and go to Discord and all that. Monokle is really focused on the workflows related to working with manifests. So it's validation of manifests, navigating manifests and their relationships and links between them, editing and creating manifests, working with kustomize and helm and debugging the output of those tools. And then of course also interacting with your cluster, diffing and applying and comparing and doing a bunch of things that you often do as a day-to-day developer working with building and deploying applications to Kubernetes. If you want to look at how Monokle fits in with other tools, today you'd probably be using an IDE like Visual Studio Code or WebStorm to create YAMLs and write code, and you might be using a cluster dashboard like Lens or another one to inspect what's running in your cluster and perform some operational tasks there. And Monokle really sits in the middle of those tools, so it's really focused at helping you with a bunch of workflows and tasks related to manifests that is not something that's covered by IDEs, but it's definitely not something covered by cluster dashboards either. And you can use it alongside those tools without a problem. Switch between them. Monokle will obviously stay in sync with your file system and all that. So it'll be just fine using these three kinds of tools together. So that's all I'm going to say. Let's jump in and have a quick look. So this is a kind of default starting window when you start Monokle. You've used it a couple of times. I see my previous projects here to the right. We'll have a look at some of those. There's some tabs to the left and to the top, and in the middle here I can start from an existing folder or create an empty project or start from a template. But we're actually going to start by just looking at a really simple project containing just one YAML file that contains two resources. To the left here, I have a file explorer. I also have panes for working with kustomize and helm and templates. We'll get back to those. In the middle, we have our resource navigator. So this shows all the resources that Monokle finds in the file system that you're looking at or at your cluster. And to the right here, you'll see the editor for the resource that you're currently looking at. So you can see here, the YAML for the selected deployment or service. I can, of course, also just select the file here to the left, which will show me the entire file with both resources in it, with the delimitator in the middle. If you're not a big fan of YAML, you can also use form-based editors. There's a metadata editor, which is available for all types of resources where you can manage the metadata section. And there's a form editor helping you, edit the rest of your resource through a form. And so if you're not, a fan of YAML or just want to make sure you get everything right, or you might, need some help in discovering what properties there are and what values they have, you can use the form editors instead, and they'll obviously be in sync with the YAML view that you have here. There's a link to the documentation on the Kubernetes website. And there's also links between resources. You can see here there's an incoming link to this deployment, and there's an outgoing link from the pet store. So this is the selector here in the pet store that selects the template in the deployment, and Monokle will kind of visualize these links and relationships between all the resources it finds, making it really easy for you to understand dependencies and references between them. It'll also, of course, validate those. So if I change this to something invalid, you'll see that now this is a warning. You'll see that the incoming link for the deployment is now gone because there is no incoming link. Obviously, if I change this back, the icons will come back and everything's okay. And this is a great way of course, notifying you if there seem to be invalid links in your resources. When you make changes, you're sure that if you're changing any names or things like that, that everything is still up, lines up nicely, and that you haven't introduced any integrity errors or the like. So let's jump into a little bit more complex project. So I'm going to actually open the Argo rollouts repository, or the manifests included in the Argo rollouts project that I just cloned from GitHub. And you can see here the file system to the left. You'll see that there's a lot more resources defined in that project. I can once again select the individual resources. Automatically, I'll see which files they are in. I can also select a file, which will then highlight the resource defined in that file. You can see these numbers shows how many resources there are in a file. So this file actually contains 3 resources, but most of them just contain 1. And here you can see also the warnings for invalid links, or links that seem incorrect. So for example, this cluster role binding here has a subject ref to a service account that's called Argo Rollouts Dashboard. And there is actually a service account in Argo Rollouts Dashboard, but it's expected to be in the Argo Rollouts namespace, which isn't. This one is in no namespace, or in the default namespace. And this is maybe fine when you're looking at the files, but of course, when you deploy these Argo rollouts, you'll have to make sure that the namespace for the service account lines up with the subject ref. So something to be aware of that you actually, when you deploy. So in this way, Monokle kind of immediately validates all your resources, both when it comes to compliance with the corresponding schema, but also when it comes to references and links between resources. So it helps you identify any errors really quickly. Just visually, you can see kind of what could be wrong and what might need to be fixed. Argo rollouts makes use of kustomize, and Monokle has some neat functionality related to kustomize. Specifically, let's just select, these are the customizations that were found in that folder. So I'm just going to, I just selected this one. You can now see in the middle here, all the resources that are kind of affected or covered by this customization are highlighted. So you can easily see the scope. You can see the customization here itself, and there's a form-based editor for that as well. But one of the neat features here is that I can do a preview. So I click the preview button, and what's happening here is that Monokle is running kustomize in the background, and then taking the output of that and showing you the resources generated by kustomize. So I can see here now all the 14 resources that were generated when I use kustomize on this cluster install customization. And you can see there's actually one warning here, and this is the warning that we just saw before. It's still expecting the Argo rollout service account to be in the Argo rollouts namespace. So let's actually just go back here to the customization and add the namespace here, Argo rollouts, and reload the preview. And so what you'll see now is that the service account is now in the Argo rollouts namespace. It has the namespace set, and we no longer have any warnings. So this was it's a really easy way to immediate validate the output of kustomize, but also see try out different values, configurations in your customization. Just recreate the preview, check that everything seems okay, and before you do any apply or do anything with it. So super flexible, powerful functionality. Just return to that just to make sure I don't mess things up. We have this was for kustomize, but Monokle has a similar functionality for Helm. So let's look at this project here. This is the AWS Lambda controller project from AWS. Once again, straight cloned from GitHub. You see a bunch of resources in here. There's a bunch of there's a bunch of CRDs, and there's a bunch of things. But maybe more interesting, there's a Helm chart. So I've selected the Helm panel here to the left. You can see the Lambda chart. I can select the chart YAML file. You'll see the YAML file here. You see also there's a form editor for editing the YAML chart YAML file. So if you want to add some dependencies or do anything, you can do that. But what I can also do here is look at the values file provided, and I can preview that. So if I select preview here, what's actually happening now is that Monokle is running Helm and then showing the output of the Helm chart with this values file applied. So once again, a great way to kind of easily make changes to your YAML values file. You can reload the preview and see what effect those changes have on your on the generated resources. This was kind of a really quick preview of there's a more advanced preview functionality when running Helm. So I can create a preview configuration because, as you might know, Helm has a lot of command line options. So let's just call this test. This is the values file. So if you have multiple values files, you can select multiple and order them in the way you want them to be applied to Helm. You can select if you want to use template or install, and then you can specify any command line option, that kind of is available for Helm. So in this way, if you have any special needs in how you run Helm, you want to pass in some values, you can do that. And then once again, you can do save and preview, and it'll run the preview on your Helm chart with that values file using the configuration that was provided there. So once again, super powerful way to try out different Helm configurations on your Helm chart before actually deploying anything to your cluster. So speaking of clusters, let's have a quick look at how Monokle helps you work with your cluster. I've set up a local minikube cluster. Monokle will automatically detect all your contexts configured in your kube config. In the settings here, you can point it to which kube config you want to use. You can also specify which Kubernetes version you're targeting. So Monokle will use the correct schemas, etc., for validating resources. So if you're targeting a cluster or a set of resources that are using an older version of Kubernetes, you can change that here, and Monokle will automatically use the corresponding schemas for validating and generating and all that kind of stuff. So let's just press load here, and what this is going to do now is connecting to my local minikube and showing me all the resources in there. And as you can see, there's a lot of them. There was 585 resources. You can scroll through them. Obviously, that maybe not that interesting. We can filter. Let's filter on namespace. Let's just look at the Argo CD namespace. So now I can see here, these are all the objects in my Argo CD namespace. And as before, you see all the links between objects. So it's really, here's a service that refers to a pod. We can easily kind of jump back and forth between things. There's actually a warning here. There's a pod selector for a notification controller, which there doesn't seem to be anyone running. So this is once again a really flexible way just to connect to your cluster and navigate and relationships and the objects that are in there. And you can, as you saw, do a bunch of filtering on name and kind and a bunch of things. So there's a lot of features to help you quickly understand what's running in your cluster. And you can actually make ad hoc changes to these resources as well. Let's remove the filter. I wonder if I have, let's check out here, pet store. I have a pet store service deployed. So I could just make a change here, 8081, and deploy that, which would then, deploy the changed port of 8081 to my cluster. So that didn't work well. For some reason, I got an error. Doesn't matter. The point being here is that if you need to do hot fixes to your cluster, which I know you shouldn't be doing, but maybe if you're working on a local cluster, just trying out different things, Monokle makes it really easy to do that. But now that we were looking at the pet store, let's go back to that project that contained it. Let's remove this filter that we had. And what I wanted to show here is some of the more features around interacting with your cluster. So I can diff my objects against what's in my cluster. As you can see here, this is my local pet store, and this is the pet store running in my cluster. And I can see the differences. I can deploy to my cluster, but I can also replace my local version with what's running in a cluster. But I can also do what we call a cluster compare. So this will help you diff all the objects in your cluster against what you have running locally, and diff compare them. So if you have a big set of resources, and you want to make sure that before you deploy them, you want to see what the differences are and what how that might affect your cluster, you can do what we call a cluster compare, and you can easily see kind of which ones will change and which will not, and make individual changes before you do that. So it's a very powerful way to do more what we call a multi-resource diff or a cluster compare. Okay, last thing I want to show is the template functionality for creating resources. So for now, we've just been working with existing resources, but obviously sometimes you have to create new ones. And there's here to the left a bunch of templates that you can use. You can also just create resources from scratch, which will more or less give you an empty YAML. But let's say we want to create a role binding and service account. Let's do the entire thing. Let's use this role binding and service account. Let's use that template. So this is the name. This is my node. I want to have that for this API group, for these verbs, and that's it. Done. You can see now that we've created these objects here, which I now have that service account that was created, and I can work with that. Obviously not very helpful, but I can go into the metadata editor and work with that service account to add more content to it, and further down the line deploy it to my cluster, etc. Okay, let's jump. I think that was kind of it. A lot of features in there and constantly evolving. We looked at validating, we looked at navigation, we looked at debugging Helm charts and customizations. We looked at using templates for creating resources, and we looked at interacting with my cluster and looking what's in there and doing these resource diff and cluster compare. So there's a lot of features in there just to help you with your day-to-day workflows around manifests in Kubernetes. So I hope that kind of stands out as what you could do with your IDE, and definitely versus what you could do in your cluster inspection tool that you might be using. Once again, thanks for watching. Head over to GitHub, where you can download the latest version. You can interact with us on Discord and complain or suggest improvements or praise, whatever fits your state of mind. Love to hear from you in any case. Thank you so much for watching this, and have a great day. Goodbye.